Let's get started. Relax, listen, and let the story guide you. There are moments in life where silence does not bring peace, but instead amplifies whispers from the invisible, echoes from places that should be silent. I am a person who always seeks quiet, not because I love solitude, but because my work requires high concentration, a space undisturbed by the noise of the outside world. But it seems that, in my journey to find silence, I accidentally stepped into places where the silence was broken by things even scarier than noise. My story is not a single event, but a series of successive experiences, a reluctant journey into the hidden corners of reality, where darkness is not just the absence of light. It all started with the decision to rent a private workspace. I was tired of the hustle and bustle of shared offices, where the sound of typing, ringing phones, and small talk constantly interrupted my train of thought. I needed a sanctuary, a personal sanctuary to complete my projects. And I found it, or rather, I thought I found it, in an old commercial building located in a rather remote corner of the city. The rent was suspiciously cheap, but the quietness of the surrounding area convinced me. The homeowner, a tired-looking man with austere features on his face, made a passing mention of the building's age. "It's solid," he said, his voice even just a little dated. "The interior is, well, probably going to be renovated at some point." His eyes were a bit evasive when talking about how the building had changed hands many times and few tenants stayed long on the top floor, the place I had chosen. At that time, the excitement of finding my own space overwhelmed all doubts. I just nodded, signed the contract, and received the cold metal key. My room was on the top floor, at the end of a long, narrow hallway. It had a single rectangular window, looking down a little trafficked alley. During the day, sunlight shines in, drawing dusty sunlight streaks dancing on the old wooden floor. But when night fell, that window turned into a dark mirror, reflecting a blurry image of myself and the cramped space behind. Outside, there seemed to be only thick darkness, swallowing all the city lights, creating an oppressive feeling of isolation. From the first evening I entered the building to arrange my belongings, a vague feeling of insecurity crept up inside me. The hallways had the typical smell of old buildings, a mixture of dust, mold, and cheap cleaning chemicals, an unpleasant scent, as if the air had been stagnant for decades. The only light came from a few old fluorescent bulbs, one of which near the stairs kept flickering, casting eerie dancing shadows on the peeling paint wall. I told myself it was just the nervous feeling of the first day in a strange place, that everything would be okay once I got used to it. But the normalcy I was hoping for never came. I often work late, taking advantage of the building's absolute quiet after office hours. Other tenants, mostly small offices or startups, adhere to a 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. work schedule. The cleaning staff only comes early in the morning. So after 6 p.m., I was almost certainly the only person left on this floor, if not the entire building. The silence was wonderful at first, but gradually, it became heavy, almost tangible, squeezing me. And then I started hearing them. Footsteps. The first time was around the end of the first week of work. I was engrossed in typing, completely absorbed in the project, when a faint, steady sound echoed from the end of the hallway. A heavy thump, thud, thud sound, as if someone was wearing hard-soled shoes on a wooden floor. My heart jumped slightly. I glanced at the wall clock. It was almost 9 p.m. No way. Everyone has gone home. I listened. The sound seemed to stop. It's probably due to the old ventilation system, I reassured myself. Ancient buildings often make all kinds of strange noises when the temperature changes at night. I tried to shake it off and get back to work. But the next night, they came again. Also around 9 p.m. This time, the footsteps were clearer and more decisive. They started from afar, where the hallway was dark, then moved closer, steadily, not too fast, not too slow. A deliberate, almost measured rhythm. My heart started beating faster. A cold feeling ran down my spine. I sat motionless in my chair, ears pricked up, trying to analyze the sound. It was definitely the sound of someone's footsteps. A person wearing dress shoes, perhaps, because the sound has a characteristic heaviness and resonance. My palms started to get wet. Breathing becomes more rapid. I could clearly hear the blood rushing to my temples. The footsteps are getting closer. They are moving towards my door. I imagined an invisible man walking down a dark hallway. Footsteps were now right outside the door. Thud, thud, thud. They stopped briefly, right in front of my door, then continued, passing by, and tapering toward the other end of the hallway, finally disappearing into silence. I breathed a sigh of relief, but my body was still tense. Fear and curiosity battled within me. Part of me wanted me to lock the door and pretend like nothing happened. The other part urged me to open the door, to face whatever was out there, to prove that it was just an illusion or some other reasonable explanation. But that night, and many nights after that, I just sat still like a statue, paralyzed by an invisible fear. My stomach was in knots, and I couldn't concentrate on work anymore. This experience repeated itself almost every night I stayed late. Always around 9 p.m., always those heavy, steady steps, always starting from afar, moving closer, passing through my door and disappearing. My body reacted in a familiar pattern. Heart racing, palms sweating, breath hitched. Fear became an unwanted companion during my late work hours. I have tried many ways to cope. I turned on the music loudly, hoping to drown out the sound. But strangely, even through the pounding music, I could still feel the steady rhythm of those footsteps, as if they were not just a sound, but also a vibration spreading throughout the structure of the building. I tried wearing noise-canceling headphones, but the uneasy feeling was still there, and sometimes I was startled to take off my headphones and listen, just to confirm that the silence was indeed silence, or to hear familiar footsteps approaching. I began to doubt my own sanity. Am I under too much stress? Is the pressure of work and isolation in this old building creating hallucinations? I tried to find reasonable explanations. The sound of water pipes expanding, noises coming from downstairs, the sound of wind blowing through the open window. But no explanation really fits the regularity, purpose, and specific location of those footsteps. I decided to ask the homeowner tactfully, "Has anyone recently rented a room on this floor?" I asked one morning when I ran into him in the lobby. "Or does anyone often work late?" He looked at me, his eyes a bit suspicious. "No," he shook his head. "That area is just you. Like I said, few people like the isolation at the end of that hallway." "What's wrong? Is there any noise?" "Oh no." I try to keep my voice normal. "It's just that sometimes I hear some strange noises at night. It's probably because of the old building." He shrugged. "That's right, it's an old house. All kinds of noises. If it's anything serious, just call my emergency line." That brief conversation did not help me feel more secure. On the contrary, it further confirmed my loneliness in this mystery. One evening, when the deadline for an important project was approaching and I was forced to work all night, the tension reached its peak. The building seemed colder than usual. The radiator in the corner of the room kept clicking uncomfortably, occasionally emitting a stream of hot air with a musty smell. I felt like someone was watching me, even though I knew there was no one else there. When the clock read 8:57 p.m., I stood up, heart pounding in chest. I will not let this fear control me anymore. If there's someone in the hallway, I have to know who it is. I stood crouched behind the door, my hand loosely placed on the cold knob, holding my breath and waiting. At exactly 9 o'clock, they started. A faint thump, thud sound from afar. I felt a rush of adrenaline. Breathing becomes shallow and rapid. Cold sweat began to break out on the forehead and back of the neck. My legs are shaking a bit. They are getting closer, more clearly, right outside the door. Gritting my teeth, I twisted the knob and yanked the door open. In front of me is darkness, an almost solid black color. The fluorescent lights on the ceiling of the hallway, which were already weak, were now extinguished, perhaps due to a problem with the old electrical system. The only light was a faint red streak emanating from the emergency exit sign at the far end of the hallway. I squinted, trying to see through the darkness. There's no one. The hallway was completely empty, but the footsteps continued. I heard them right next to me, so close that it felt like a cold wind had just passed over my shoulder, carrying with it moisture and the smell of old dust. Thud, thud, thud. They passed where I was standing, moving forward in the darkness and then getting smaller and farther away, as if the invisible person had just rounded a corner that didn't exist. My mouth is dry. I tried to call someone, but all I could get out was a choked sound. I stood there, stunned, still clutching the doorknob, staring into the empty darkness where the sound had just passed. A feeling of horror and absurdity overwhelmed me. How can there be sound without a source? How can there be a sense of presence without form? I don't know how long I stood there, maybe a few minutes before I could move again. Trembling, I slammed the door shut and locked it. That night, I couldn't work anymore. The image of the dark hallway and the sound of invisible footsteps haunted my mind. I started to reconsider everything. Could it be that this is not a normal hallucination? A thought flashed. Was there any physical vibration? A few nights later, when the footsteps sounded again on time, I didn't open the door. Instead, I knelt on the floor, pressing my palms and ears to the cold ceramic tile next to the crack in the door. As the footsteps approached, I felt it. A slight vibration, very slight, but distinct, spread across the floor in time with the rhythm of the footsteps. Thud, vibrate, thump, vibrate, thump, vibrate. They passed through my position, and the vibrations moved as well, then gradually weakened and disappeared along with the sound. That's physical evidence. Can't be an illusion anymore. Something or someone was actually walking in that hallway, something with enough weight to create vibrations, but invisible to my eyes. My fear transformed into something deeper, more primal, a terror of the inexplicable. I decided to try another method, video recording. I bought a small security camera, one that can record both video and sound, and has night vision. On a Thursday night, I arrived earlier than usual. I mounted the camera on the wall opposite my door, angled it so it could cover the entire length of the hallway. I carefully checked the connection, making sure it was recording continuously to the memory card. Then I went into my room, closed the door and waited, my heart beating like a drum. As the clock ticked closer to 9 o'clock, the tension in the room became thick. I sat in a chair, my eyes glued to the phone screen connected to the camera, my ears listening to every little noise. And then they came again on time like a ghostly ritual. Thud, thud, thud. The sound rang out clearly through the camera's microphone. I stared at the screen. The hallway remained empty under the dim infrared light. Not a single person, not a single movement. But the footsteps continued, getting closer, passing right in front of the camera, then fading away and disappearing. I rewound the video many times. The sound is recorded perfectly, clearly, unmistakably. But the image only shows a quiet, dusty hallway. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. The camera doesn't see what my ears hear and my hands feel. That was the last straw. This final proof did not relieve me, but on the contrary, it pushed my fears to a new peak. I was dealing with a supernatural phenomenon, something beyond the normal laws of physics. This building is haunted, or there is some entity attached to it, an invisible entity that still interacts with the physical world. That thought made me shiver. My sanity, my mental health, is more important than any quiet workspace or cheap rent. I knew I had to leave, right away. The next day, I returned to the building during the day, and for the first time felt that the sunlight in this place also had a cold, lifeless look. I quickly gathered my things, packing everything into cartons. Every creak of the floor, every small noise in the building made me jump. My chest felt heavy, and sweat continued to pour out, even though the air was cool. As I dragged the last box out of the room, I didn't dare look back at that hallway. I returned the key to the landlord, lying that I found another more suitable place. He took the key back without asking anything else, but in his eyes I saw a silent understanding, almost relief. I never went back to that building again, nor did I try to learn more about its history or previous tenants. There are mysteries that are probably best left unexplored. I ran away from the invisible footsteps in that hallway, but their echoes seemed to be engraved in my mind. Even now, many years later, every time I pass by a deserted hallway at night, my heart still beats a beat faster, and part of me still listens, half in fear, half in anticipation of hearing that heavy, ghostly thud, thud again. It is a reminder that there are things that exist between dimensions, echoes of the past or entities that we cannot understand, and that sometimes we may accidentally enter their realm. After the horrifying experience at the old commercial building, I tried to return to normal life. I found another workspace, brighter, more modern, and most importantly, more crowded. But the echo of fear is still there, like a persistent ghost following me. I became more sensitive to strange noises, more wary of lonely places, and my sleep was frequently interrupted by vague nightmares of dark hallways and invisible footsteps. Sometime later, I decided to completely change the environment. I have always had a passion for antiques, objects that carry the mark of time and untold stories. I thought opening a small antique shop could be a new beginning, a way for me to focus on tangible things, the beauties of the past, instead of invisible fears. After months of searching, I found what seemed like the perfect place. An old two-story house on a quiet side street, with a large glass facade and a cozy gallery space on the ground floor. What attracts me most is the spacious basement below, which I can use for storage and a small restoration workshop. The rental price is also quite reasonable. The owner is an older man with white hair and a somewhat melancholy face. When I expressed interest in renting the house, he looked at me thoughtfully. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice low and slow. "This place, it has its own quirks." "How weird," I asked, trying to stay calm, even though I felt a little uneasy when I remembered the previous homeowner's similar words. He sighed, looking out the window. "The house is old. The electrical system is not very stable. Sometimes there are strange noises. And the basement, it's quite cold." He hesitated. "There have been a few tenants before, but they didn't stay long." "Why is that?" He shrugged, a vague gesture. "Maybe they don't like the quiet. Or maybe they feel uncomfortable." He didn't say anything more, just mumbled something about the building having been vacant for a while before he bought it. Once again, excitement about the new project and the ancient beauty of the house overcame shyness. I suppose quirks are just a euphemism for the usual maintenance problems of an old house. I signed the lease and started cleaning and organizing the store. The first weeks passed quite smoothly. I displayed my favorite antiques on dark wooden shelves, cleaned the windows, and gradually transformed the ground floor space into a cute little shop. The creaking of wooden floors and the jingling of wind chimes every time a guest opens the door have become familiar sounds. I really feel in love with this place. The basement was, as the homeowner said, quite large and cold. It was built of stone and concrete, had no windows, and was lit only by a few yellow ceiling lights. The air here is always moist and has a characteristic earthy smell, mixed with the smell of rotten wood and something faint and indescribable. I mainly use it to store items that haven't had time to be restored or bulky things. I don't spend much time down there, only coming down when I need to get or put something away. Until one late night, I stayed late to complete the inventory. The store was closed. The street outside was quiet. I suddenly realized I had left an important notebook in a box in the basement. Grabbing a flashlight in case the light bulb down there malfunctioned again, I opened the heavy wooden door leading down the stairs. When I was halfway up the steep, dark stairs, my ears suddenly caught a strange sound. A whisper, or rather, many whispers, overlapping each other, came from the basement. They were very quiet, as if 2 or 3 people were talking to each other in extremely low and muffled voices. I stopped, my heart pounding. The familiar cold feeling came back. There could be no one down there. The basement door is always locked from inside the store, and I'm the only one with a key to the store right now. I held my breath and listened. The whispers continued, wordless, like the murmur of some secret conversation, with irregular pauses and starts. The flashlight in my hand began to tremble. Cold adrenaline ran through my body. Is it an illusion again? Or is it the sound of water flowing in a pipe? Noises coming from the neighbor's house? I tried to find a reasonable explanation, but this sound sounds very human, very close. Gathering all my courage, I continued to walk down, slowly, trying not to make any noise. The flashlight scanned the vast and quiet space of the basement. Stacks of boxes, dusty old furniture, and restoration tools lay silently in the darkness and weak light from the ceiling bulbs. There's no one. When my feet touched the cold concrete floor, the whispers suddenly stopped. This sudden silence was even more terrifying than the sound just now. It was thick, heavy, as if the space was holding its breath with me. I swung my flashlight around every corner, my voice trembling, and asked, "Is there anyone down there?" Only my own echo responded. Cold sweat broke out on his forehead. I quickly found the notebook I needed, then hurried back up, not daring to look back. I slammed the basement door and locked it, feeling like I had just escaped an invisible danger. I tried to convince myself that it was just because I was so tired, my imagination had run away. But my previous experience in a commercial building made it impossible for me to easily brush it off. The next few days, I tried to avoid going to the basement unless absolutely necessary. I work on the ground floor, trying to focus on the customers and the beautiful antiques. But every time it gets dark, every time the store gets quiet, part of my mind listens, in case the whispers return. And they came back. About a week later, late one evening when I was alone, I heard them again. Still muffled whispers, coming from behind the basement door. This time, they seemed a little clearer, though the words were still indistinguishable. There is an urgency, almost urgency, in their tone. My throat is dry. Fear mixed with curiosity arose again. I have to know what's going on. This time, I was more prepared. I took out my phone and turned on recording mode. Taking a deep breath, I slowly opened the basement door. As soon as the door opened, the whispering stopped. I walked down the stairs, phone held high, microphone pointed forward. I walked around the basement in silence, trying to pick up any sounds. The cold and damp air enveloped me. I felt like I wasn't alone, like there were invisible eyes watching my every move from the darkness between the stacks of boxes. After about 10 minutes of hearing nothing but my own heartbeat and breathing, I turned back up. Sitting in the warm store, I nervously played the recording again. Completely quiet, not a whisper. There was only the sound of my footsteps on the concrete floor, the rustling of clothes, and a very slight background noise, like the distant whistling of wind. The failure of the recording made me even more confused. Is my mind playing tricks on me? Or is something in that basement smarter than I thought, knowing when to shut up? My basement obsession began to affect my work and life. During the day, I am often absent-minded and startled by small noises. At night, I had trouble sleeping, often dreaming that I was trapped in a dark basement, surrounded by endless whispers. I started losing weight and my eyes were dark because of lack of sleep. Customers sometimes ask me if I'm okay, and I can only force a smile and say I'm a little tired. I realized I couldn't continue living in such fear. I need to face it. One night, as the storm was howling outside, adding a layer of chaos to the eerie silence of the house, I decided to hold a vigil in the basement. I brought a folding chair, a strong battery-powered lantern, a thermos of hot water, and a thick book, intending to stay there until morning, or until I figured something out. I sat down on the chair, placed the lantern next to it. Its light dispelled some of the darkness, but also created long, strange shadows on the stone walls. The sound of rain hitting the windows upstairs and the sound of wind whistling through the roof created a chaotic symphony. At first, the basement seemed unusually quiet, with only the damp cold seeping into my skin. Time passed slowly. I tried to read a book but couldn't concentrate. My eyes kept glancing into dark corners, my ears straining to listen for any unusual sounds. Tension gradually builds up in the chest, making breathing difficult. My whole body was like a tense guitar string. And then, amidst the sound of wind and rain, they began again. Whispers. This time they seemed more numerous, more chaotic, echoing from all around me, not just from one fixed direction. They're still muffled, disjointed, but the volume seems a little louder. I felt like I was sitting in the middle of an invisible crowd gossiping about something I couldn't understand. I try to stay calm and concentrate on listening. Are they trying to say something to me? Or are they simply the echoes of a past event, trapped in this space? They didn't seem hostile, but their persistent and mysterious presence made me extremely uneasy. Suddenly, I noticed a movement in the far corner of the basement, where the lantern light didn't reach clearly. It wasn't a specific shape, but more like an area of darkness that was rippling, contracting and expanding again, slowly, almost organically. My heart stopped beating for a second and then started pounding again like it was about to burst my chest. Black spots began to dance before my eyes. I grabbed my spare flashlight, turned on the strongest light, and shined it straight into the moving mass of darkness. It seemed to recede slightly, melting into darker areas, but I could still feel its presence. It's there. Something tangible or almost tangible was coexisting with me in this cold space. At the same time, the whispers became more intense, more urgent. They swirled around me like an invisible wind, creating a strange pressure on my eardrums. I feel dizzy and nauseous. The air seems to thicken, making it more difficult to breathe. The feeling of being watched was now intense, almost intrusive. In a moment of utter panic, the survival instinct arose. I can't stay here another second. I jumped up from the chair and staggered back toward the stairs, my eyes still glued to the dark corner where the dark mass lurked. The whispers followed me, as if trying to hold on. I rushed up the stairs, almost tripping on the last step, heart beating wildly, breathing gasping. I slammed the basement door shut, turned the lock several times, then leaned my back against the door, my whole body shaking. I could feel the sudden silence from the other side of the door, a heavy, waiting silence. That night, I couldn't sleep at all. I sat huddled on the sofa on the ground floor, the lights on until dawn. Images of the mass of rippling darkness and frantic whispers kept repeating in my head. The next morning, I made my final decision. I can't live and work in this place anymore. It's not just weird. It's actually dangerous, at least for my sanity. I called the landlord and announced that I would move out immediately, using the excuse of finding a better business location. He didn't seem surprised, just sighed and agreed to end the contract early. The cleanup was quick and stressful. I tried not to go down to the basement again, asking friends to help move the remaining heavy items up there. Every time the basement door opens, even during the day, I still feel a cold air and a threatening silence radiating from there. When I locked the store door for the last time, handing the keys to the sad-looking landlord, I felt a great sense of relief, but at the same time an indescribable sadness. I loved this store, but the darkness that lay beneath it was too scary. I wonder if previous tenants experienced similar things? What could that mass of darkness and whispers be? Are they the souls of people who have lived or died in this house? Or is it something more ancient, associated with this land? I don't have the answers, and I don't want to look for them anymore. I learned a bitter lesson. Sometimes, curiosity can lead us to places we shouldn't go, lifting veils that should be kept private. This second experience reinforced the feeling that perhaps I wasn't simply unlucky in choosing haunted places. Perhaps there is something about me that attracts these phenomena or makes me more sensitive to them. That thought was both scary and made me feel alone. After having to flee places haunted by unexplainable phenomena twice, I fell into a state of confusion and exhaustion. My antique business was unfinished, my plans fell through, and more importantly, my spirit was severely damaged. I began to doubt everything around me, from the smallest noises in the temporarily rented apartment to my own feelings. Fear became a persistent shadow, causing me to lose sleep and live in a constant state of anxiety. I needed a radical change, a completely different place, perhaps away from the city, closer to nature, where silence meant true peace, not a cover for things lurking in the dark. At that moment, unexpected news came from a lawyer, a distant relative, an aunt whom I had only met a few times when I was very young and had almost no memories of her, had passed away and left me a house in the countryside. It was the only property she had, and since there were no other close relatives, I became the sole heir. At first, I was a bit hesitant. A house in the countryside, strange and perhaps old, evokes unpleasant memories. But then another thought occurred. Maybe this was the opportunity one needed, a place to escape old haunts, a brand new start in a place that had no history for me. I decided to see the house before making a final decision. The trip to the house took several hours, going through winding country roads, flanked by fields and rows of green trees. The house is located on a fairly large, isolated plot of land, a short distance from the main road, accessible via a gravel path. It was an old-fashioned two-story wooden house. The white paint was faded and peeling in many places, revealing the dark wood underneath. Tile roof covered with green moss. A few shutters were loose and dangling, occasionally hitting the wall with the breeze, creating a monotonous clicking sound. Around the house, weeds grew above knee-height, and overgrown bushes surrounded the foundation, making the house look desolate and forgotten. Overall, it's not exactly scary, but it certainly takes a lot of work to fix. Yet there was something in the quiet of this place, the chirping of birds and the smell of fresh air, that made me feel a little hopeful. I used the old key the lawyer gave me to open the heavy main door. Inside, the air was stagnant and smelled of a mixture of dust, old wood, and something faint, slightly sweet, like dried flowers or old perfume. Most of the furniture was covered with white sheets that had turned yellow. Weak natural light filtered through the dusty windows, illuminating tiny dust particles floating in the air. I spent the afternoon going around the house. It has a fairly simple structure. The ground floor has a living room with an old stone fireplace, a spacious but outdated kitchen, and a small dining room. Upstairs, there are 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. Everything was covered in a thick layer of dust. Cobwebs hung around the corners, but the structure seemed basically solid. But then I noticed it. A short, narrow hallway lies between the kitchen and a small room on the ground floor that may have been used as a storeroom or maid's room. This hallway was only about 3 meters long, had no windows, and was lit only by an old bare light bulb, without a lampshade, dangling from a dusty electric wire. As soon as I entered that hallway, a sudden cold feeling came over me. It is not the cold of an unheated room on a cool day. This was an unusual, bone-chilling cold, as if the temperature had suddenly dropped 10 degrees Celsius within just this 3-square-meter area. My breath caught in my throat, and goosebumps appeared on my arms all at once. I stopped and looked around bewildered. The hallway walls are covered with old patterned wallpaper, yellowed and peeling in some places. The floors are dark wood. Nothing special in terms of appearance, but the cold is unmistakable. It was dense, almost tangible, and carried with it an indescribable feeling of unease. I felt like I was being watched, like there was some invisible presence lurking in this coldness, silently observing me. I quickly walked down the hallway and entered the small room at the end. This room is also cold, but not as cold as the hallway. I turned around and walked through the hallway again. The feeling of being cold and being watched came back just like before. It only exists within the exact scope of that corridor. Stepping out of it into the warmer kitchen, that feeling immediately disappeared. I tried to find an explanation. Could there be a draft from somewhere? A hole in the wall leading out? A cold water pipe running underground? I touched the walls, examined the floor, looked up at the ceiling. There were no obvious signs of a gap or ventilation shaft. Everything seems discreet. The feeling of insecurity began to rekindle. Again, another place with unexplainable strange things? But I was too tired to run. Perhaps this is just a simple physical phenomenon whose cause I haven't found yet. Or perhaps I have become too sensitive, too easily haunted by past experiences. I decided to stay at the house for a few days, clean it up myself, and take a closer look. I want to give this place a chance. I need a place to rest, and perhaps renovating this old house will help me forget those obsessions. The following days, I was busy cleaning, removing dust covers, and rearranging furniture. I tried to avoid going through that cold hallway as much as possible, taking a detour through the living room if I want to get from the kitchen to other rooms. But occasionally, when forced to pass through it to get something from the storage room, the coldness and feeling of being watched remained intact. Sometimes, I even feel like something has just passed the back of my head, or hear a very light rustling sound from the darkness of the hallway. At the end of my second week in the house, I decided to stay the night to see if anything unusual happened at night. I chose the larger bedroom upstairs, which had windows overlooking the ruined garden behind. That night, the house became especially quiet. There was no noise from the city, only the sound of insects rustling outside the window and the occasional sound of tree branches rubbing against the roof. I lay on the old bed trying to fall asleep, but the vague feeling of insecurity is still there, keeping me restless. As I started to drift off to sleep, I heard it, a whisper, very small, very far. But it wasn't like the chaotic whispers in the antique store basement. This sound seemed to be more directional, coming from downstairs. My eyes fluttered open in the darkness. I lay still, holding my breath and listening. The whisper came again, still soft, but this time I could pinpoint its location. It came from the area near the kitchen, near that cold hallway. A shiver ran down my spine. No, it can't be. Is it a whisper again? Am I imagining it? I sat up in bed, my heart beating loudly. I listened attentively. After a long silence, the whisper rang out again. This time it lasted a little longer, like a short sentence, but the words were still indistinct. The voice sounded like that of a woman, very old, weak and sad. Fear and curiosity motivated me again. I slowly got out of bed and tiptoed to the bedroom door. The upstairs hallway was dark, with only weak moonlight coming through the window at the end of the hallway. I walked down the creaking wooden stairs. Each step seemed to echo throughout the quiet house. When I reached the bottom of the stairs, I could hear the whispering a little clearer. It was definitely coming from the direction of the cold hallway. I walked towards the kitchen, then stopped at the entrance to the hallway. The cold suddenly came, stronger than during the day. The air was thick and heavy, and the whispering sounded so close now, right in the hallway, as if someone were standing at the other end, talking to themselves in the dark. I don't dare enter. I just stood there, in the doorway, trying to hear better. The voice was still weak, broken, and full of sadness. I felt like she was telling something, a sadness, a regret, but I still couldn't understand what she was saying. Suddenly, the only bare light bulb in the hallway, which was off, flickered a few times and then lit up, emitting a weak yellow light. That light was enough for me to see the empty hallway. There was no one there, but the whispering continued, even when the lights were on. And then, something even stranger happened. I saw a blurry shadow quickly glide across the end of the hallway, from the storage room into the opposite wall and disappear. It only happened for a split second, like an illusion, but I was sure I saw it. I let out a scream of fear and backed away, tripping over the kitchen steps and falling to the floor. The whispers fell silent. The light bulb in the hallway flickered again and then went out, returning darkness and cold to the place. I sat on the cold floor, panting, my heart beating like it wanted to jump out of my chest. What just happened? The whispers, the shadows, the cold. This house is also haunted. There's no doubt about it anymore. And this time, it seemed even more direct, more tangible than previous experiences. I can't stay here another night. I got up, rushed to the upstairs bedroom, and packed a few necessary personal items into my backpack in a state of panic. I don't care about other things. I just want to leave this place as quickly as possible. As I ran down the stairs again, passing the cold hallway entrance, I didn't dare look there. But I could feel the cold and a heavy silence, as if someone was standing in the dark, watching me with infinite sadness. I rushed out of the house, slammed the door behind me, and sprinted toward the car parked at the end of the gravel drive. I unlocked the car, threw my backpack in the back seat, and started the engine. Headlights swept across the front of the old house, silent under the moonlight. For a moment, I felt like I saw a shadowy figure standing at the upstairs window, looking down at me. But maybe it's just the lighting and my imagination. I stepped on the accelerator, backed the car quickly out of the driveway, then turned around and sped away on the deserted country road, not daring to look at that haunted house again. I gave up that house just as I gave up the previous two places. I informed the lawyer that I did not want to receive the inheritance, that he could sell it or do whatever he wanted. I don't want anything to do with it anymore. 3 times. 3 different locations. 3 horrifying experiences with supernatural phenomena. That cannot be a coincidence. There was some connection, and that connection seemed to be me. Do I carry some kind of energy that attracts these entities? Or am I simply too sensitive, capable of sensing things that others cannot? I don't know, and I probably will never know for sure. But those experiences changed me forever. I no longer seek absolute quiet. I learned to live with the noise of the world, because sometimes silence can hide even scarier things. I still work, still live, but always carry a constant vigilance. Every time I enter an old building, a dark room, or a deserted hallway, a part of me automatically listens and feels. I listen to invisible footsteps, inarticulate whispers, felt the unusual coldness in the air. The fear has not completely disappeared, but it has become a part of me, a reminder of the thin line between our world and other realms, places where logic and reason no longer count. And sometimes, late at night, when I lie awake in bed, I still wonder, have I successfully escaped, or are those entities simply waiting patiently, in some dark corner, for their next encounter? My story is a warning, or perhaps just a confession about the ghosts that are real, not only in old houses but also in our minds. They are uninvited echoes, inexplicable feelings of insecurity, and sometimes we have to learn to live with them, or forever run away in the dark. And you, when night falls and silence prevails, do you ever listen carefully to the sounds around you? Are you sure you're really alone? Just relax, and listen. Who knows, you might hear something too.